Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Readiness Report with me, Redi Tlhabi, and the Daily Maverick. This is where we try to make sense of everything that is going on around us. Welcome. So today, my friends, I don't have a guest on the podcast. And I think it's that kind of thing that you don't want to air your dirty linen in public. Today, I'm airing dirty linen in public. Today's podcast is to demonstrate how South African broadcasting, South African media, but broadcasting in particular, because that's the sphere that's closest to my life's work, to my history, how they drop the ball when reporting on US-SA relations. There is a lot of hysteria and things that are non-issues, things that have no editorial significance, are elevated, amplified, and magnified to a point that they cause such a negative perception. Of course, journalists should not be public relations officers for government or for any business entity. That's not what I'm saying. And I've spent my entire life critiquing the government, critiquing the ANC, whether it's on domestic issues or foreign policy. So I'm quite comfortable being very robust and strident when it comes to critiquing the government. But here's what I've seen happening. I've been living in the US for about 2 years. There are people who have commercial interests, who have vested interests, who have political differences with South Africa, who have foreign policy differences with South Africa. They are in the US, they're in South Africa as well. A lot of money goes back and forth as people try to capture public perception, as people try to influence policy. They've got media platforms here in the US, they've got media platforms in South Africa, there are meetings that happen, and whoever has the time and sometimes the financial resources to invest in a narrative, that's the person whose story gets told. But as journalists, it's not our jobs to just be slaves of these vested factions and interests. When you get a press statement, it says what it says. But is that the story? That's not how I was trained as a journalist. You have to look at what else are you not being told? What else is the person not saying? Because obviously what's in that press statement is what the person wants you to see. It's what a person wants the public to know. But then you become inadvertently a player in these political games and machinations. What am I talking about? Every time there is a little bill that is introduced by a US lawmaker, South African media, breaking news, a bill comes before Congress seeking to punish South Africa for its stance on Israel, for its relationship with Russia, for its relationship with Iran. Okay, it's interesting, but hold on. What often happens, as has happened recently, is that there have been developments in the United States Congress. I want to take you through what these mean. 2 proposed bills in the US House of Representatives, 2 smaller nyana bills. And I'm going to tell you why they're not significant in the way that South African media has made them out to be. So stay with me here, right? 2 proposed bills in the House of Representatives to punish South Africa over its position on the Israel-Gaza conflict and broader foreign policy alignment, as I said. But how serious are these legislative threats? And will they become law? You guys are reporting on them as if they are going to become law. Let me tell you something interesting. Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate has 100 members. Of course, senators are far more senior than representatives. Of course, they've got a longer constitutional making mileage, as it were. They serve for longer terms as opposed to the House of Representatives. But equally important, the House of Representatives is made up of 435 members. So we are talking about Congress that is made up of 535 lawmakers in the United States. One lawmaker from Florida, whom you've probably never heard of before, introduces a bill. One lawmaker, and it's breaking news in South Africa. You don't pause to find out why is it that this bill, proposed bill, does not have a co-sponsor. That's how it works. It's hard to pass legislation in the United States. It's hard to pass legislation in South Africa. You go through the process. But what happened here was that you had a lawmaker from Florida You probably cannot even say his name, but you wrote about it as if it's just breaking news because they are partners in South Africa, the people who are lobbying them, South Africans who are lobbying the US to take a particular stance against South Africa, they lobby particular people, okay? And the lobbyist gets to the lawmaker. The lawmaker happens to be some congressman, Republican Congressman Greg Steube, Steube. I don't know if I've said that correctly. The bill is titled Addressing Hostile and Anti-Semitic Conduct by the Republic of South Africa, Act of 2025. He introduced this bill in June, and it was reported in South Africa. What does this bill propose? It proposes the suspension of direct US assistance to South Africa and sanctions against government officials. Okay? What is interesting about this? One person proposed it. It's not bipartisan. He couldn't even get co-signatories from his own party. When you propose a bill in the US, you've got to get co-sponsors, meaning other lawmakers, to support you. The more bipartisan it is, the greater the chances of it reaching the committee. Stay with me now. A guy proposes a bill, a lonesome guy, and you guys say it is news. You don't look at who else signed. Nobody else signed. The bill has no co-sponsorship. And then what happens after someone proposes a bill and it gets co-signatories? It goes to the committee responsible for that issue. Okay? It goes to the committee. This one hasn't even reached that. And often these proposed bills die at that committee level because they don't enjoy bipartisan support. So you can actually get an idea of how far a proposed bill will go. You can actually speculate that it will have traction or not have traction, whether it will take off or just be stillborn. This one, by this representative from Florida, has no co-sponsorship. So it's gone on and it has to reach the committee, and that's where it gets discussed. And if there's no support, that's it. That's it. It just dies. It doesn't even get to the voting level. But you write about it as though it is about to become law. And the people who have a vested interest in a particular issue, in this case, Gaza, Israel, they get to dominate the narrative with this FAFO. You know this new thing when people say F around and find out? Yeah, back around and find out. That's what you see on social media. Yeah, here's a bill about to punish South Africa. FAFO. South Africa's F and FAFO moment has come from one lawmaker, not even a senator, from one lawmaker who couldn't even get anyone in his party to be a co-sponsor. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a moment. Let's come to the second bill that got you guys so excited, getting your knickers in a knot, instead of pausing and thinking and stop being sensationalist. Yes, I'm shouting at you. A second bill is the US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act. It was filed earlier this year by Congressman Ronnie Jackson, right, of Texas. It calls for a sweeping review of diplomatic and economic ties. It has just one co-sponsor, John James. John James used to be the chair of the House Committee on Africa, and I went to Congress, to the committee, to testify about the state of democracy in South Africa 2 years ago. It was all controversial. I was accused of being a Russian, of being a CIA spy. People were not listening. My message to Congress was, you cannot use geopolitical differences to punish South Africa. At that time, they were talking about cutting off PEPFAR. It was in 2023, during Biden's time. They were talking about cutting off PEPFAR and AGOA and so on. So you find a select few lawmakers pushing a particular position. It doesn't mean the president will sign it into law. It doesn't mean that Congress will sign it, will vote in support of it. So there are all these layers. So I know John James from that interaction when I went there and said, don't cut off PEPFAR, don't punish us and cut off AGOA simply because we have geopolitical differences on Russia and Ukraine. At that point, October 7th hadn't happened yet, which, as we know, became another geopolitical hot potato. Let me go back to him. He's a Republican. So the guy who introduces this particular bill is a Republican. The co-sponsor is John James, who's also a Republican. And I understand they got other two lawmakers, not senators, other representatives to sign. So this one has the lawmaker who introduced it and 4 co-sponsors from his own party. from his own party. You can't pass a law based on the signatures of 5 people out of a house, out of a Congress of 535 people. It's 5 of them. I'm talking about the second piece of legislation. We talked about the first one of Representative Stube, which has 1 signature, his. This one has 5. And you guys all got hysterical. Let me tell you why it's important to look at the profile of the people who are introducing these laws. Representative Jackson is sponsored by AIPAC. It's not even a secret here in the United States that you have a lobby, you've got think tanks that are furthering Israel's interests. I'm not being anti-Semitic, it is a fact. Because what happens is they proudly announce it. It's not even investigative journalism. AIPAC puts graphics where they congratulate senators or representatives who have won an election, and they say an AIPAC-sponsored representative. So according to Just Facts or Vote Smart, Jackson, who introduced this law from April, or this bill, I'm making the same mistake as you, calling it a law, this bill, he is listed as a 2024 industee of AIPAC. What is AIPAC? American Israel Public Affairs Committee. I'm not anti-Semitic. Get over yourself. I'm not anti-Jewish. There is an organization called American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And public data shows that Jackson has received about $125,000 US in pro-Israel lobby donations via AIPAC and related organizations. It's public knowledge that AIPAC puts in money. It puts in money in the kind of narrative and policy work that it wants to achieve out of the United States. And it is worth noting that Jackson in particular is strongly aligned with Trump. He signed the amicus brief supporting the 2020 election challenge. It's important. The backgrounds are important. But you in South Africa, breaking news, a bill is before Congress to punish South Africa. You don't do background checks on who's put it forward, who's supporting that person, why would they want to take a particular position, what is the bigger picture. So I think it's not irrelevant that Republican Representative Jackson from Texas is aligned with Trump, signed the amicus brief supporting the 2020 election challenge. He voted against certifying Biden's election win in 2020, and he voted against Trump's second impeachment. He has introduced legislation restricting transgender athletes' participation in women's sports, both in 2023 and 2025. That's a separate issue, but I'm just trying to acquaint you with his politics because it's all part of what makes a story rich and gives it the necessary layers. And he also co-sponsored resolutions. Do you remember Attorney General Merrick Garland, the one that Obama wanted for the Supreme Court position, and the Republicans frustrated that nomination, even though they could have taken it forward. They waited for Obama to come out of office. He never got to that Supreme Court position, and then Biden made him the Attorney General. He's the one that served under Biden. And he voted Jackson voted for that guy's impeachment, and he wanted the FBI director, voted out. He voted against the Fiscal Responsibility Act. He sponsored various positions by conservatives, various bills that ban Medicaid for undocumented immigrants. So I'm just giving you the picture of the guy who sponsored a particular bill. And I'm saying that in reporting on these legislative processes, it's important that you understand that these bills are there to further a particular politics. They are not law. They need to go through processes. And just by looking at a very superficial, even casting a superficial eye, and the superficial eye here is, okay, who introduced this bill? How many people co-signed, co-authored? None. Or 4 from the same party. So it's not bipartisan. What are the chances that it's going to go to the committee? Zilch. What are the chances that it will end up on the floor? Zilch. Okay? So neither of these bills has advanced to committee stage. You can check that. I'm not lying to you. They have not advanced to committee stage. Neither has a Senate. Okay? Neither has a Senate as a signatory. And without bipartisan support or companion legislation in the Senate, the chances of becoming law are very, very low. Okay? I still think the symbolism matters, guys. I'm not saying this is a joke. I'm saying the symbolism matters. Why? Well, this is what I think. Let me take a sip of coffee. I talk a lot when I'm cross, and I'm cross with the media. The symbolism matters because these bills reflect a growing frustration within parts of the US Congress, particularly among some conservative lawmakers over South Africa, okay? Over perceived or real alignment with certain anti-Western powers, and whether that is true or it's just a subterfuge. And the bigger issue here is Israel and Gaza. I happen to think the bigger issue here is Israel and Gaza. It is also Iran, although there are all sorts of changes and iterations of US-Iranian relations in the last couple of weeks. So for now, it's just a war of words amongst a select few. I would say not even a dozen people, about 8 out of a Congress made up of 535 people. It also means that there are people in South Africa who are lobbying certain think tanks in the US. There are think tanks in South Africa like the Hudson who take a particular stance. And this is where the former DA deputy minister appeared. This is where Emma Powell appeared. This is where the 3 Afrikaners who came here appeared. So the Hudson has positioned itself as being a repository of anti-South African government, the government led by the ANC, anti-South Africa's foreign policy, and anyone who wants to talk about that can find a home in this space. So we've had 3 Afrikaners, we've had some members of the DA, a former Minister of Trade and Industry coming to the Hudson Institute to speak. There's nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is that there is also an information vacuum from the government. You don't see them here. They're not taking part in conversations on platforms that could communicate South Africa's foreign policy clearly and in a more constructive ways. There are lots of think tanks here in Washington that can host dialogues and bilateral discussions on business, innovation, technology, climate, you name it. The world is not just made up of the political side. And for as long as there are vested interests in South Africa's foreign policy positions, you will find certain organizations hosting certain people and sending information to the media about those meetings. Your job is to be discerning, is to interrogate what is going on, what does it mean, who's speaking to me, why would they speak, what am I missing from the story? But you guys just run with breaking news, a bill is before Congress. You don't tell your audience that there are 535 people who must vote on that. You don't tell your audience that there are no co-sponsors. You don't tell your audience that it's not bipartisan. You also don't do the homework of finding out the journey of a piece of legislation in the United States. At this point, these 2 bills are at introduction level. They haven't reached a committee. A member of Congress, House or Senate, introduces the bill. That's what's happened. The committee considers it. The bill is referred to committee. These bills haven't even reached committee. If it has little or no support, okay? If it has little or no support, it may die in committee and never move forward. Okay, but if it goes further, there's a third layer. It goes to the chamber for approval. Why is this important? Because it must pass both. You know what both is, ne? Both. 2. 2. It must pass both the House and the Senate by a majority vote. That means, my friends in broadcasting in particular, 218 votes out of 435 in the House are needed. And then 51 out of 100 in the Senate are needed. Or, I won't get into the complicated filibuster where you need 60 to overcome a filibuster in most cases. But that's usually around pieces of legislation that affect the United States directly. And if you think about it, there was another piece of legislation, I forget its name. It was meant to criminalize any criticism of Israel. It had bipartisan support. There were Democrats and Republicans who supported it. And then there was supposed to be a vote. There was literally supposed to be a vote about whether or not criticizing Israel is a criminal act or not. There was not even a vote held. This is on a US piece of legislation that is introduced by US lawmakers, supported by US lawmakers. It didn't even pass. Never mind passing. It wasn't even voted upon. So what am I saying? Let's be discerning. We're causing unnecessary hysteria. We are demonstrating a lack of discernment, a lack of appetite for interrogating even the most basic things. The two pieces of legislation from June and the one from April have not reached a level where they deserve the amount of attention that you are giving them. But if you are going to make it your business to give them attention, at least do your homework. And the homework here is basic. It is exactly what I've just told you. Some of you may have woken up this week, I did certainly, to a piece by a gentleman called Max Mishandled. The headline is that Wall Street misplaces South Africa's collapse. It is an opinion piece in a WSJ. It says that Washington is failing to act against South Africa's foreign alignments. It says financial markets fail to spot the reckoning ahead. It is such hyperbole, really. It's doom and gloom. And he's saying a reckoning is coming for South Africa. The Trump administration sees it. So does Congress, but financial markets don't. And that's a problem. Multinationals and finance houses recognize South Africa's deteriorating domestic conditions. And he's right about youth unemployment. He's right about frequent power and water outages and failing state-owned enterprises. But even this, I would say, is just a part of trying to get the United States to act against South Africa. When Cyril Ramaphosa was here, Donald Trump didn't even pay attention to the Israel-Gaza matter. He said it's at court, we'll see what happens there. The expectation was that he'd be a little bit more forceful and that the US under Trump would come down hard on South Africa over Israel. It hasn't happened yet, but there are those who wish for it to happen and they haven't gone away. So you will see these kind of opinion pieces from time to time that aren't lying about our domestic problems, but to send a message that as a result of this position and our foreign policy position, there is this groundswell of action against South Africa. Everything must be looked at in perspective. Is the reaction from Washington commensurate with whatever transgression South Africa is perceived to have made? And when one person writes an opinion piece, or 3 people or 4 people sign a piece of legislation, is that really reality? Or are there conversations happening somewhere that you are missing because you are so busy listening to the wrong people? And I think it's important for me to mention this article, this opinion piece that just dropped just now by Max Mishandled. Who is Max Mishandled? He's with the FDD. The FDD is Israel's leading think tank in DC. I'm not saying these people are not doing important work. I'm saying understand who's saying what, why they are saying it, what is it that they want to achieve, and why now, before you run and breaking news over something that is just lobbying and factionalism from a particular party with vested interest in the outcome. Calm down, stay steady, focus. Don't be a public relations officer. Don't give the ANC government or the GNU or Cyril Ramaphosa a free pass. Do not take your eye off the ball when it comes to some of our contradictory foreign policy positions, when it comes to corruption, when it comes to poor service delivery. Don't take your eye off the ball. Don't take your eye off the ball when it comes to the corruption that is bringing our state to its knees, corruption that involves law enforcement. Don't take your eyes off the ball. But understand, when it comes to the geopolitical space, there are a lot of vested interests. Some of them are commercial, some of them are about influence, some of them are about Zionism. And South Africa has taken a particular stance, and from time to time, in fact, every so often, there's going to be a narrative installment that furthers a particular position. Your job is to wake up and discern and analyze and listen to a plurality of voices. I'm done. Thank you for listening to the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick. You can catch it on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.